Oh no, Tim, it's the Joker.
Right, Paul. I'd better change to Batman.
No, I want to be Batman.
Oh, all right. Holy kid brothers. To the
Bat-Molls.
2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Bat-Polls. We're Bat. We're really, really Bat. This is Tim in Tokyo, not Michael Jackson, with my brother Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
Also not Michael Jackson.
And we're once again joined by novelist Nancy Northcott in North Carolina. Welcome, Nancy.
Thanks. Hey, everybody.
Hey, Nancy, glad to have you back.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So our theme version this time is by Colie Brice. It's titled Batman Blues in G minor. Colie Brice is a familiar name to me, but I'm not quite sure why. I looked through his very long bio on his site. He was in bands called Gemini and Phantom's Opera. He was an audio engineer and a chief archivist at Polygram Records, recorded a lot of solo albums. And that's just the beginning of the rundown of his career. But there was nothing there that made me say, like, aha, that's why I know his name. Mm-hmm. This particular track was apparently released in 2005, judging from the picture of the CD that's in the YouTube video of it. But the sound of it certainly evokes the 60s and 70s. It sounds like something you'd hear on an album rock station in 1975 or something.
Well, and its very prominent snare drum use was more, I think, a thing of that period than you get now.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I've been listening to much 70s rock on various Sirius XM channels, and there's only so much you can take. You know, if you play one more song by Bread, I'm going to strangle this radio. I guess that's not really rock so much as pop, but anyway.
Well, I suppose they're putting it on the Yacht Rock channel, even though it's not really Yacht Rock.
Yeah, Nancy, are you an aficionado of yacht rock at all?
I don't even know what yacht rock is.
It's basically, Hall & Oates and Kenny Loggins, I would say, is, pretty much.
It's the kind of jazz-ish pop sound from particularly like the early 80s.
Like Steely Dan and their imitators and progeny.
Well, then, the people you're naming, yeah, I guess I'm a fan of that. It's recorded.
Rupert Holmes, man. Rupert Holmes. Anyway, you can only take so much of that, too.
Yeah, the yacht rock guys, wrinkle their noses at Rupert Holmes. They don't like him, and he's not yacht rock, according to them. But...
Right, the people who actually came up with the term yacht rock and did some hilarious little quasi-documentaries about Loggins and breaking up and messing up, basically living in the alley, and Loggins, moving ahead with his career so that he can record Danger Zone for Top Gun.
Now, is this yacht rock like YACHT, like the boat, or?
Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it's music that has very little to do with anything happening in the present world. It's got, it's no politics, no history. It's all about falling in love or having a wry opinion of people around you, or, it's very narrowly focused. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but the definition is narrow enough that the station on Sirius XM that's called Yacht Rock will end up going all over the place and, picking up stuff that couldn't possibly be yacht rock, like Olivia Newton-John is not yacht rock. And yet they'll play Olivia Newton-John over and over and over again on that station, maybe because it was, it was kind of living across the street from yacht rock. I don't know. It was close enough to kind of fall under under that category for them anyway.
Anyway, well, I'm hoping we can find a yacht rock version of the Batman theme. That would be awesome, but haven't found it so far.
Da, da, da.
All right. So, of course, Nancy's here, and that means we're talking about women on Batman. This is the third and final season 2 discussion. And we split up the episodes as usual, set aside Julie Newmar Catwoman. So we're talking about Batman's Anniversary, also known as John Aston Riddler, Joker's Last Laugh, Piece of the Action, King Tut's Coup, Black Widow Strikes Again, Pop Goes the Joker, and I Spy, and their respective second parts also. We all three, I believe, watched King Tut's Coup, Batman's Waterloo, because I thought that might be the most compelling discussion about women on the show, because there are a couple of women who are prominent in that one. So, Nancy, what did you think of Lisa Carson and Neela?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they were Lee Meriwether and Grace Lee Whitney, who went on to have, notable careers. And I thought the interplay between them was interesting. The Grace Lee Whitney character, Neela, was more of the traditional, I'm going to help you to get you out of the way so I can get my man back kind of character. But for the period, Lisa Carson, I thought, had some backbone and some layers and some agency, which is, she was not a cardboard cutout figure. And so I enjoyed her part in it. And I kind of liked her dad's plan. He was going to match her up with Bruce Wayne, but now he's met Batman and Bruce won't really do, and Batman would be better. And it's just kind of like, really? You had to go there, really? Because she's such a strong character compared to a lot of the women who are on this show. And it's like, you had to waste it with that, really? But I liked both of them in this episode. Lisa more than Neela, but I thought they were both pretty interesting. And just as a sidelight, did you all recognize Lloyd Haynes, the future star of Room 222?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the more prominent black characters in the whole series.
Right. He's certainly got the largest speaking part. I'm absolutely sure about that.
Well, second to Eartha Kitt.
Right. Of course. Okay, so the largest speaking part for an African-American actor in season 2, at least. So Neela, for one thing, I mean, there's a way in which Neela bugs me just because she's, as you say, Nancy, she's there, primarily to, kind of never get into a cat fight with Lee Meriwether, but also, trying to get her out of the way so that she can, be with King Tut, although it's hard to see what the attraction is, except the sense of humor, perhaps. But Lee Meriwether, I think, I don't know, what really grabbed me about her is that she makes her father look like an idiot, for one thing. But between the two of them, it's clear that she got the good genes from mom, and is luckily not following in dad's footsteps because he seems pretty thick. But what I really found interesting about her was that she seems so sincerely kind of into the role. She's great at rolling her eyes and looking like, this is the most, ridiculous thing that's ever happened to me. But when she's seducing Bruce at the end at the door, where she promises him milk and cookies, she is absolutely sincere.
Yeah.
I was really struck by that, she's sort of playing innocent, but not really. I mean, she's not playing ingenue at all. At least it seems that way to me. She knows what she's doing, but she's also clearly really into this guy. And it comes off quite honestly in a really interesting way without being like kittenish or girlish or just kind of, playing into the stereotype of the woman who goes gaga for the rich boy.
Yeah.
Well, and she's fine with offering him milk and cookies, even though he just said that he's married to the Wayne Foundation and he doesn't have time for actual females. It's like, well, but okay, well, just once, huh? Yeah, I mean, definitely. agency. And also she's showing that her dad doesn't know what kind of guy she's into if he thinks that Bruce is no good for her. Because she does. She thinks he's good for her.
Well, and when she manipulates King Tut into calling her father, I mean, she's really the driver of that sequence.
Yes.
He's just reacting to her through there. And that's unusual for a female character on this program.
That's for sure. You know, comparing her to the Moll in the John Aston Riddler arc, which I watched, she's she's a completely different kind of anagram, haha, a completely different character from a totally different mold.
Well, sometimes I wonder what went on behind the scenes with the contracts, because at this point Lee Meriwether had been Miss America. She probably had a certain degree of name recognition.
Sure.
She'd been Catwoman in the Batman movie too.
Yeah, and so they knew what she could do, and she had name recognition, and she didn't have to do this. So I just, I'm curious. I'd like to go back in a time machine and be a fly on the wall when they're working out that contract.
Yeah. I wonder how she wound up in this in the first place. Dozier knew everyone in Hollywood at this point.
Something else Nancy said I wanted to come back to, which is there's a bit where Lisa and Neela talk to each other. How many instances of a woman talking with a woman can you remember on this show? There have not been very many. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it passes the Bechdel test, but at least it's a woman talking with a woman.
Well, there was an episode where there was a policewoman who was put in a maze. It might have been one of the Catwoman episodes.
That was the Catwoman Sandman, yeah.
And so a female character, it was either, it might have been Catwoman who spoke to her or at her. I don't think they had anything resembling a conversation, as best I can recall from that episode.
No, I mean, Catwoman has a couple of female assistants in that one that, but that's definitely a boss and underling relationship. Just do this, do that. But yeah, I mean, the Nora Clavicle episode, there are some women talking with each other for obvious reasons. We're going to be talking about that one again pretty soon.
Yes, but they say purely and exclusively idiotic things to each other because that's such an anti-feminist screed of an episode.
Yes. But yeah, just interesting that we've actually got women talking with each other here.
Well, and two women in supporting roles who actually have lines. I mean, you compare them with Anna Graham, and both of them, each of them has more to do than Anna does. Not hugely more, because there are two of them and it's split up between the two of them. But each of them is more involved in driving the plot than Anna really is.
Right, absolutely. In fact, Neela even adds the wrinkle of trying to free Lisa and Robin in part 2, which actually causes like story events to happen.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. She's part of a cause and effect chain. This is crazy. How did this happen?
So I watched Joker's Last Laugh, Joker's Epitaph with Josie Miller, played by Phyllis Douglas. And I mean, she's just kind of a typical Moll in that, just following the lead of the Joker. But one thing that kind of stood out to me was her last scene after the climactic fight at the bank. And, for some reason that it's not clear to me, the Joker has tried to railroad Bruce into marrying Josie. It's some kind of a blackmail thing, but it's not really clearly explained. And after the final fight, Batman puts handcuffs on her and she says, "If you see Bruce Wayne, tell him it might have been fun." And I thought that gave her a little bit of humanity. I mean, it seemed like a really, that's the most sincere, honest thing she says in the whole episode, I think. She's actually thinking, oh yeah, maybe we could have had some kind of a romance. And yeah, I'm kind of sorry it didn't happen. So that kind of stood out to me.
Well, I don't know that they ever really said what the point of this marriage thing was, except for Joker through her to get his hands on Bruce's money was the only thing I could figure.
I guess.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's it. But there's also something interesting about her just saying, it would have been fun. The British, have the phrase, we just had a bit of fun, meaning, we had a one night stand. And so there's something, a little unusual about her, I think, at least in code, expressing her like sexual desire for Batman, just to say, what?
Yeah, she doesn't. She's not saying we could have had a nice long-term relationship and grown old together. She doesn't say that, and I don't think she means it either.
No, and moved to a farm in Australia or anything. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, we could have been a nice fling. It could have been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not just one night, but not long-term.
Well, and that's kind of a different response from a lot of the Molls in these episodes. At the end, when they get busted by Batman and Robin, they kind of sigh over Batman, or they're so sorry, or they're going to make it better.
Yeah.
And even Fun is more confident. It's more independent.
Yep.
And it's, in some ways, it's a lot more assertive than what we usually see from these characters.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. No falling into the kind of traditional role of, I want to, be a good girl and be your helpmeet, Batman. That's not what she's saying at all.
Are you tired of fanboy comics podcasts? Looking for a show that really appreciates the comics storytelling medium and how it works? A show that looks at comics from any genre and anywhere in the world, comparing the storytelling techniques of different creators in different comics cultures, with manga, newspaper strips, European comics, and more, discussed alongside mainstream US comics. A show that includes talks with well-known creators like James Robinson and Dan Jurgens, and with less famous creators that you really should know. And hey, we'll even critique your comic. If you're looking for that show, then you're looking for Deconstructing Comics, and it's right here at deconstructingcomics.com. Also available in iTunes and on Stitcher. This is Tim saying check out our show on Wednesdays. That's Deconstructing Comics.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky podcast network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
So Paul and I have just recently watched a piece of the action to talk about the script, the Green Hornet one. And of course we've got Pinky Pinkston in that episode, and she kind of drives some plot points too, doesn't she?
Oh, sure. I mean, she's the one who nearly gets Colonel Gum in, tons of trouble and then has to be more or less restrained.
Yeah. Of course we got a woman who is a hostage. That's nothing new, but
no, she's also a business owner, but she's a business owner who, it makes, I feel quite ambivalent about her, because on the one hand, she inherited her father's business and seems to be trying to do a good, ethical job of steering it, of, taking the helm. But on the other hand, she's so feminized in a really kind of old-fashioned, oh, look at my little pink doggy kind of way that it's almost as though giving her even an inch of some kind of autonomy meant that, in terms of her costume and her way of speaking and her little pink dog, she had to walk back a mile in terms of, some kind of progressive representation of femininity just generally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It seemed like when I first watched the opening sequences to that, I wasn't entirely sure whether she knew what the Roger C. Carmel character, Colonel Gum, in those opening scenes was up to or not. And I think it was partly the way it was cut, because when she learns what they're up to, Colonel Gum is on the phone with one of the guys at the stamp factory. And then the guy hangs up and looks up, and there she is with her dog looking grim.
Right.
So I'm sitting there thinking, is she looking grim because he's double crossing her? Is she looking grim because she just found this out? And then the next scene, without really any explanation, she's all tied up. And so I thought, oh, I guess she really wasn't in on this after all. But, you know, there again, she didn't crumple. She didn't, you know, she somehow managed to get her dog to eat all the appropriate letters to leave the right clues in the alphabet soup.
She's a genius dog trainer for sure.
Clearly. And poor Aunt Harriet. Can I just complain about that for a minute?
Oh, please.
We solved this with the Bat computer because Aunt Harriet's hairdryer shorted out her manner.
Oh.
You know, how old is your wiring exactly? If a hairdryer was
a woman's vanity
and the Bat cave, do you not have a generator? Have you not heard of that? It's just like, oh, give me a freaking break. So you might notice I'm not really happy with that part of the plot.
Because of a woman's vanity, we won't be able to solve this crime.
Yes, and she's got 9 hair curlers plugged in simultaneously. And what's the Bat Diamond for anyway? Answer me that. They've got a reactor back there. Why doesn't that take care of all their, you know, surgeon power needs?
But, you know, I did think that Roger C. Carmel was really good in this episode with the different characters he played, the different assumed identities that he played. And I had mostly seen him before on that Star Trek episode where all the twins are running around, which is not one of my favorite episodes. And
one of the mud episodes.
Well, yeah, there are 2 mud episodes, right? Or are there 3?
Yeah, 2. 2.
Right.
Yeah.
And so all the robots are, you know, running around at that colony. Yeah. I find him really just unwatchable in Star Trek, but I have to admit that I came into this Batman episode feeling obviously very negative about, you know, his acting style. His sense of humor is never funny. To me, it just seems like it's, you know, completely put on. His kind of, you know, Avery Schreiber would have been a better choice, I think, for with his bag of Doritos in the Star Trek episodes. But he's not so bad here. You're right, Nancy. I've found him more, I don't know, varied and able to, you know, kind of meld into different characters in an interesting way. Maybe he needed something like that to challenge him a little in the Star Trek episodes.
Well, and, you know, Diane McBain, who played Pinky, went on to have a pretty nice career. And the same can't be said of all the women who, I mean, a lot of them, I look at them and I don't even think they look familiar. So,
well, yeah, we found from IMDb some of them, like a few years later, were out of showbiz. Either, I don't know if they, you know, got married and retired, or they just couldn't get roles or what, but.
Or if they were doing anything, they're doing like, you know, down market straight to video horror movies, which, you know, following a long line of, you know, in the footsteps of Joan Crawford doing B minus horror movies at the end of her career as well.
Yeah.
So just going back to Grace Lee Whitney for a moment, Nancy, do you have any idea what she did after this, you know, kind of run of shows in the 60s? She left Star Trek and then was in the Batman, you know, cast as a guest star in 67.
I don't think she did much of anything. I looked her up years ago and I haven't looked recently. And so my memory could be faulty, but I don't remember there really being anything notable on there.
What's your read on her in Star Trek? I mean, you know, one could go straight for those moments where she's pretty much, you know, swooning over Captain Kirk and think that she's really kind of, you know, playing the yeoman, the female yeoman character, you know, almost in parodic form on that show. But on the other hand, you know, what do you think?
Well, you know, when I look back on those episodes of Star Trek, that's mainly what I think about with her. She was like the spear carrier in the background. And so every once in a while she has a spear to carry. And then she has to look longingly at Kirk every now and again. And, you know, I haven't watched the original series in probably 15 years. So my recollection may not be fair to her, but I just don't remember her ever getting anything like for me to go, yes, watching it as a young female fan at the time that it was on.
Yeah, I'm glancing at her IMDb here. It just in the whole 1970s, it shows like 4 appearances for her, one of which was a tiny, tiny role in the first Star Trek movie. The others,
Oh.
the others were on The Bold Ones, The Lawyers in 1970, playing blonde. Canon TV series in 74 and the Next Step Beyond TV series in 78. I don't even know what that is.
I was expecting at least
So
one appearance on Love American Style, but you can't have everything.
Or The Love Boat.
no, she was never on either of those apparently.
Drat.
But back in those days, I think it was not just in Hollywood, but in general, harder for women to have a career and a family. I don't know whether she had a family, but I think if you are of a type that's interchangeable with others of that type, it makes your life harder. How many young, attractive blondes are going to show up for a casting call for a young, attractive blonde policewoman in the background? Pretty many, probably.
Yeah, I hear you.
And
you have a whole police force of those blondes.
Yeah. That was what made the show Policewoman so outstanding, is that, Angie Dickinson in the opening credits had on that sexy outfit and kind of swung her hips when she walked. But when push came to shove, she could kick butt in that show. She didn't have to do it a lot, but she did it. And that was kind of a different niche for women on television at the time.
Yeah, I don't have much memory of it because I was relatively, pretty darn young at the time. But I do remember it being really the only show like that I had any knowledge of, where a woman was actually playing, a cop and being, the lead character, and doing, what was traditionally, certainly in Hollywood, but elsewhere too, considered a man's job.
Yeah. And I think we talked before about Honey West, Anne Francis's very short-lived show when she was a private investigator.
Right.
I think it came on right after Batman, and I wasn't supposed to watch it because I don't think my parents approved of Honey West. And I would kind of sneak to watch it every now and again if I thought I could get away with it, because she was kind of not this with the super spy aspect, but kind of like the Black Widow in terms of an independent operator much earlier than the Black Widow really became prominent.
Right. I love stories like that, Nancy, about, sneaking television that one's parents didn't want one to watch because you identify with a character that you're kind of forbidden from, connecting with because that show is not good for you. That sort of thing. I think it's amazing to know that broadcast television just basically sent out whatever it felt like sending out. And of course, it was tiered by, time of day so that certain shows weren't shown before 9 o'clock or whatever. But if a kid could get a hold of a television set and be alone in the room, you could totally contraband and find something that you didn't expect, that your parents didn't sanction, and it's like this kind of amazing magical escape moment from your parents' expectations of you. It's a lot more serious than it seems to be, I think.
Here's my confession. So when I was in 6th grade, and remember, Dad took me along on his kind of business trip to Washington, D.C. And one evening we were visiting some friends in that area, and I think Dad had to go to a meeting, and I kind of hung out at their house, and I was in an upstairs room, and I watched Charlie's Angels, which was kind of a forbidden show at home. I was like, oh boy, I haven't seen this before.
Look, they're running on the beach, and they're running on the beach again.
And I do have to say that Jennifer Garner in Alias, running in high heels, did a better job of it than Charlie's Angels. I mean, I watched Charlie's Angels because it was women kicking butt and solving crimes. And I was at that point, I think, older than you, so parental approval or disapproval was no longer relevant. But I look back at it and I think, well, okay, it was a step forward for women in television, but it still had a long way to go if you're going to put it up against shows like Alias.
Right. And it's also, television tries to do its best to attract everyone and repel no one. And so so, making a show, producing a show with women in, the butt kicking, crime fighting roles, also meant that, in whatever way possible, you need to make sure that you're hitting like heterosexual men's bandwidth. And so, if they're going to kick butt and solve crimes, they're also going to have to do it in bikinis for at least 40% of every episode.
Or evening gowns with plunging necklines.
Exactly. Yes. No backs whatsoever.
They must be both ass kicking and hot. So,
yes, but we talk about that in my in my film classes as well. That Disney films are always trying to appeal to not only the children with slapstick and funny songs and things like that, but also to dad. As well as, to the older, parents and caregivers to come. So, many of the jokes are just way over the kids' heads, kind of like old Warner Brothers Looney Tunes. And they're still funny because they're goofy. But there's also things like, Ariel and the Little Mermaid wearing a shell bikini. That's totally for like, white heterosexual dad. And there's no question about it in my mind. That they're still trying to make certain that the parents have some reason to, like, not just go for the kids, but go for themselves.
Interesting.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox now.
So since Nancy brought up Black Widow, let's talk about her. Played
Tallulah Bankhead.
Tallulah Bankhead, because
one of Hitchcock's favorite actresses, because she swore like a sailor.
Scarlett Johansson wasn't born yet, so they got Tallulah. No, wait, different Black Widow. Right. So, yeah, I just watched it this morning. It wasn't one of my assigned ones, but I hadn't seen it in a long time, so I wanted to remind myself what happens in that one.
I didn't get to rewatch it, Tim. What struck you hardest about it in this context?
Sometimes it's hard to understand Tallulah's lines. I don't know, the way she delivers them, like not quite clearly enunciate, or like her voice will drop out at places. I don't know if that's the smoking or what, but just the way she speaks.
She was not terrifically healthy. I mean, whatever else you can say about her right then, she was not doing so well. She's not too far from her, her final exit at this point.
Wasn't that her last role?
Yes, it was.
I was disappointed that she did not have a Moll, a protege.
That's interesting.
Just these two guys. Because Catwoman had a protege in the, and I wrote it down and I'm trying to read my handwriting. The episode that Leslie Gore was in as Pussycat, she was a protege. So I didn't think she was that great a villain. And it may be because of her health, but her energy levels seemed to be kind of low to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And her laugh got on my nerves. And that's totally irrational, has nothing to do with the quality of her performance, but her laugh got on my nerves.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself more interested in the people on the porch, one of whom was Meg Wiley, who was one of the aliens in the Star Trek pilot, The Cage. And I was looking at her and going, I've seen you before. And so then I was prodded by this enough that I felt the need to go and look it up. I thought the business with the bank manager was okay. And I liked that they set up that even though she had this brain scrambler, she did sometimes use gas and hypnosis. So that way, when later in the episode, when she did use gas on Batman, it wasn't out of left field. And sometimes these things do come out of left field. Oh, I have a bat polarity reverser gadget on my my utility belt. This will fix it. Okay. You just kind of have to roll with that show because that's how it was set up.
Right. Yeah, to suggest, or to imply at every moment or just state outright that Batman was literally prepared for everything.
Yeah. My favorite part of the episode was toward the end when Robin's electrodes in his ears, one of his is broken. Batman's isn't. And so Batman falls into the snare of her brain scrambler and Robin doesn't.
You needn't try to short circuit our brains, Black Widow. We're still wearing our anti-short circuit bat brain electrodes.
Batman, I've lost one of my electrodes.
Bad luck, old chum, but perhaps I can pull off a bluff. No amount of UHF short-circuiting can affect the brain of either Robin or me.
Are you definitely wearing your electrode, darlings?
Definitely.
And then Robin gets loose, which raises the question of, in all these other episodes where he was tied up and nobody was watching him, why couldn't he get loose then? Because, Dick Grayson in the comic books certainly could. In the hideout of Ra's al Ghul, he breaks free in the Neil Adams story. But Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil story. But anyway, Robin gets free, and he actually uses a strategy to get Batman to sing, and then use the brain polarizer thing to snap the spell on Batman. And considering that at the time I had a huge crush on Burt Ward, I remember really liking this part of the story. And without the remaining crush on Burt Ward, I still like it, looking at it as an adult, because Robin actually got to do something and seem competent and for once save the day, which was a nice contrast to the number of times he got rescued in these episodes that we're talking about tonight.
Right, including the King Tut episode.
Yeah,
we were just talking about, where he's basically lying prone for 2/3 of the arc.
Yeah, and Joker's last laugh, he's the one in the printing press death trap.
Yeah, and can I just say, when they get stuck on the wall in the stamp factory, and in Black Widow's web, you're wearing capes. Your bodies aren't stuck. Just take the cape off. But of course, when I watched this as a child, that didn't occur to me. I was like, oh my gosh, how are they going to get out of this? Oh no.
Well, the cape, when we're kids, I think we look at those capes and say it's part of them. They're not. Yeah. It's not Batman and Robin if they're not wearing the capes too.
Yeah.
That would be a good Sergio Aragone's cartoon where Batman and Robin are stuck, and then how are they going to get out? And then in the last panel, they've removed their capes, and their capes are stuck, and they aren't.
Yeah,
I can see it. I can see it as clear as day, Tim.
But it was easier for me to buy Jill St. John as Robin than Tallulah Bankhead as Robin.
Well, yes.
Well, Burt does a reasonable job of lip syncing to her voice. He's kind of got the attitude. That's the kind of scary thing about Burt Ward, how well he can act like a woman.
I think it's because Jill St. John is closer in size and build to Burt Ward. And we don't really see that with Tallulah Bankhead, because most of the time when she's on camera, she's sitting down.
Yeah, she's not even standing up.
And maybe that was a help thing.
I think that's right, but also
sense.
Jill St. John and Burt Ward were, obviously much closer in age to one another too.
So Pop Goes the Joker. Paul and I were discussing a bit ahead of time, and I was realizing that, it's a little bit of a twist on the old poor deluded girl bit that came up again and again in the first season, where, she's deluded, but she's not being made to commit crimes, or it's more that she's convinced that Joker is trustworthy and going straight and whatever, and then at the end she's getting held at gunpoint by him, like, oops, I guess I kind of made a mistake with this guy.
Yeah, she's really terminally naive.
Yes. Yes, she's trying to be a do-gooder, but she's so kind of, off the rails, overdoing the do-gooder role, that she's willing to believe just about anything to, keep herself in the delusion that Joker is, has gone straight and is potentially a great artist. I love that he can just go in, to an art gallery with a ketchup gun in one hand and a mustard gun in the other. And be considered a great modernist or a postmodernist almost immediately.
But she's, as a character, she's naive and she talks like a 6-year-old.
Tim compares her to Rocket J. Squirrel pretty frequently when we talk about this episode.
I was saying June Foray should have played her if that was the direction they were going to go with the character. But
Bullwinkle, that trick never works.
That's perfect. She just doesn't have a lot of nuance in her delivery, and I don't know if it's because that's the way she delivers lines or whether that's the way she's delivering them for the character, because I don't remember seeing her in anything else.
No, I don't either.
But, honestly, I think if somebody came in and started squirting paint all over my family's dining room table, even if we had enough money to just go out and buy the dining room table over again, I think I might try to intervene in that at some point.
Sure.
Yeah.
You might think that, no matter what, whether we can pay for the damage or not, as you said, Nancy, this is probably not someone you want to trust with, walking
No.
into your house, just, kind of without security guards giving you, the hairy eyeball whenever necessary.
So Diana Iverson, she only has a total of 6 credits, including this Batman appearance. Between 66 and 73. The last one was on the Rookies TV series, which I remember the title of, but I don't think I ever watched it. Some of these I've just never even heard of. So, not many appearances.
Right. She's, millionaire philanthropist, not, naive. I mean, there's really, no other way to say it. She did have a kind of presence that I thought, when she's introducing all of the artists who came out of, central castings, ethnic stereotype extravaganza ward, apparently. I say ward advisedly because they all seem to be completely insane. I mean, the poor Leonardo da Vinci stand-in has a monkey and an organ grinder, for God's sake. It's just, they should have all been arrested for producing that scene. But, she's so earnest about it. There is something kind of humorous about her performance.
Yeah.
But, there's probably no one else could be that dim as to allow Joker to, become this, lauded, great artist of Gotham City, and, sponsor him in this way. So she's kind of necessary for the plot in that way, but only because she's so deliberately dim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we have just one more on the list, which is Ice by the duo Defy.
Wait
Leslie
a minute.
Parrish.
What about Batman's Anniversary?
Okay, well, we said a little bit. Did you have more to say about Anna Graham? I did not watch that one.
I didn't.
You didn't either?
No. I mean,
Okay.
I watched it, but I don't have a lot to say about her. She seemed kind of like a cardboard cutout to me.
She is very much. I mean, she has the most interesting costume of any mall I can think of. That kind of, that almost like abstract expressionist bodysuit, which makes me think maybe she should have been in Pop Goes the Joker, because there's a character in that one named Jackson. What is it, Jackson? It's not Jackson Pollock. It's
Jackson Potluck.
Potluck, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant. I can just imagine him hanging from, a bungee cord, slapping a pot roast against against the canvas just to see what would happen. I'm afraid that there's really not a lot to say about Deanna Lund's performance, except that, she apparently doesn't mind that John Astin likes to sniff his own armpit from time to time.
I really loved John Astin in The Addams Family, but I think his performance suffers in comparison to the manic energy that Frank Gorshin brought to that role, because Astin is just more laid back. And so to me, that was a more jarring change of actor than Julie Newmar to Eartha Kitt. It was, I thought Newmar and Kitt were both really good as Catwoman in their different ways, but Astin was just so laid back compared to Gorshin that I think maybe it's not entirely fair to him to look at it that way.
I agree. I mean, Eartha Kitt had a point of view on the character that made it her own, even though Julie Newmar had owned that character so completely for 2 seasons. But Astin, I think you're right. It's not, we can't possibly be fair to him because Frank Gorshin was such a, he basically owned the screen every time he appeared on it. But I finally figured out, I think what Astin is doing when he goes like this, he's trying to make a question mark out of his arm. It finally occurred to me after all these years, he's not sniffing his armpit at all.
I always thought he was doing the thinker.
He's not like the Kevin Kline character in The Fish Called Wanda, who really does sniff his armpits in order to find his, energy or whatever it is he's doing.
Wow.
But he's not terrible in the role. I tried my best, Nancy, to sort of allow Aston to be Aston at that point. But all I could think of is how amazing he is as Gomez.
Yeah.
And his, when he kisses Morticia's arm and goes all the way up, and it's like I'm completely convinced that he is that character. Sitcom or no sitcom, comedy or no comedy, he really owns it. But here he's just doesn't have much choice but to try to step into the shoes of someone else.
Yeah.
Oh, we should comment on Aunt Harriet going mod in the Black Widow episode.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yes, let's.
And the sales girl said she might not have the face for a mini skirt. Yeah, she was talking about getting a mini skirt.
How do you like them, Dick?
Fine, Aunt Harriet, but I already have a pair of black pants.
Well, they're not for you, silly. They're for me. I've decided to go mod. Now, what do you boys think?
Oh, très chic, Aunt Harriet. Every bachelor in Gotham City will be staring.
I wanted to get a mini skirt, but the sales girl wasn't sure I had the face for it.
Have the face for it. Okay, well,
makes me want to hide behind the couch and not look at the screen until it's over.
Well, then the black pants were so daring to have pants, and when I was in grade school, girls were not allowed to wear pants to school. The girls who lived out in the country and had to stand out and wait for the school bus in the morning could wear pants under their dresses, but they had to take those pants off when they got to school.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So I sympathized with Aunt Harriet because I understand where that pants are so daring thing is coming from.
Well, yeah, and so Tallulah Bankhead is wearing pants, and so then Aunt Harriet gets mistaken for the Black Widow in the bank because she's also wearing black pants.
And opening a new account.
For her nephew.
Right. She's opening her own account, or opening an account herself.
Right, she's opening for her nephew, Robin.
Well, there's a really... I'm not even sure, we have a family audience, right? We have, kids who listen to this podcast, at least from time to time. So we try to keep things clean. But there's a anecdote that Hitchcock loved to tell about Tallulah Bankhead in Lifeboat, the film from 1944 that was filmed entirely on a lifeboat, or at least that was what we were supposed to believe. He kind of set himself the challenge of putting 6 people on a lifeboat. I believe that's how many characters there were after their ship was, sunk by the Germans. And Tallulah Bankhead is in that film. And apparently, I guess there's no clean way to say this, but she wore no underwear. And when because they were in, a tank basically floating in a little boat all day. And she said, you know what, I'm just not going to wear underwear. And then when she would climb out of the boat and somebody would be behind her on the ladder, they would get a really, really good view of Tallulah Bankhead. This was apparently something that she either didn't mind or actually cultivated because she thought it was hilarious. So I don't think Tallulah had changed that much by 1967 in terms of her just devil may care attitude toward everything. So anyway.
Oh, and that reminds me, we should at least mention too, in the Black Widow arc, people can't stop commenting on the fact that she's a woman. I think Batman says she's a sophisticated but evil woman, and Robin makes a comment like that, I think, and Chief O'Hara also.
You didn't count on us, did you, you sophisticated but evil woman?
You she-devil! Have you short-circuited Batman's brain?
Oh, so you're the she-devil who's been robbing us out of house and home.
So, we don't hear him calling the Joker a sophisticated but evil man.
Yeah,
No, of course not. Yes, men are just people, and women are just always have to be, marked out as female.
Men are the norm, and women are an aberration in this environment.
My God, just that's pretty much the way medicine has been constructed throughout history, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If we could go back to King Tut for just a minute.
Yeah,
sure.
It was a throwaway. It was slipped in, and you would hardly think anything about it if you didn't know where the show went afterward. Gordon is talking to Batman about college kids, and he's worried about his daughter Barbara, who's off at college. And I thought, that's just the little stone that drops in the pond, and the ripples spread out. And in season 3, we meet Barbara.
Yep.
So I just wonder if they had decided at that point that they were already going to add Batgirl.
Yeah, I believe they had.
Yep.
She gets another mention in Ice Spy at the very end of the season.
Bonnie, please call my daughter Barbara at college. Ask her to take a later plane home. I want to meet her, of course, but I have some cool facts to face before I get to the airport.
So, yeah, they were definitely planning to introduce Batgirl in season 3 by that time.
But Nancy, what I don't understand about that episode, and maybe you've got a line on this somehow, is that what Commissioner Gordon seems to be kind of, nervous about, is that perhaps at college, people generally get hit on the head and transformed into other people. Is that what he's worried about?
Yes, Commissioner.
First, Batman, will you be talking to Bruce Wayne?
I occasionally run into him, Commissioner. Why?
I'm worried about my daughter, Barbara.
How is she involved in all this?
Well, as Bruce Wayne knows, she's away at college. She'll be graduating shortly, and I'd hate to think that some of the dire happenings which have happened to that fine professor of Egyptology could also happen to my beloved daughter at her school.
I rather doubt that your daughter, Barbara, is going to get conked on the head and turn into a long-dead Egyptian ruler, Commissioner.
I know it sounds a little far-fetched, but she's an only child, and of course, my pride and joy. I guess I just need a little reassurance.
If I see Bruce Wayne, I'll ask him to call you. He knows much more about the present American collegiate scene than I do.
I'd be most grateful, Batman.
It's a weak excuse to make that connection, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like it because, the students got hit on the head too. And even without whatever it is that makes Tut go ancient Egyptian full all in, they did too. So I was thinking, really? You're worried about that? But as you say, Tim, it's a thin connection.
Right. I was concerned about a lot of weird things potentially happening to me when I was in college, but not getting hit on the head and thinking I was an ancient Egyptian.
Yeah.
As a result of the blow. Maybe like getting depantsed in public, or being forced to have a swirly in the toilet on the 10th floor of my dorm building, but never amnesia or metamorphosis into someone other than who I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that makes it all the more likely that scene was simply an excuse to mention Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's interesting because she's a college student, and he never really says what point where she is in the arc of her college education. But Batgirl in the comic books is already a working librarian with experience. I think she maybe has a master's degree or a PhD in that.
I believe so.
Comics. That doesn't really line up so well with this season. We're worried that she's in college, and next season, bam, she's the librarian in Gotham City and about to become Batgirl. But, I don't think that kind of continuity was a real issue for the show.
No, it wasn't something they were terribly concerned about. Just introducing her name, and the fact that she was Gordon's daughter was probably enough of a connection that, somebody watching the show in season 3 might have some dim memory of her being mentioned before, and this being a kind of fulfillment of that, the kind of unspoken promise of that bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if they had Yvonne Craig cast by that point. I mean, I'm just checking here. Yvonne was 30 at the time that she started as Batgirl. So, I mean, it's a little older than a college student. Certainly be a non-traditional student.
Well, but Amy Adams doesn't look her age in Superman. And I think people can play younger just depending on how they age.
Nancy,
Sure.
do you know the Netflix show? Or it's not just a Netflix show. It's from Northern Ireland. It's Dairy Girls.
No, I'm not familiar with it. What's it like?
It's hilarious. I mean, it's about high school students, women in the early 90s, during kind of, the last big push of the IRA. But they're also, they're in dairy. And so occasionally it's said, you have to excuse them. They're dairy girls, and everyone else understands exactly what that means.
Because they're like Valley Girl?
Well, something like that. I mean, they're completely mental. They're just, off the charts in terms of their intensity and their worries about, getting boyfriends and, being able to follow their dreams. And it's a hilarious show. But every single high school student in that show is nearly 30 or over 30. So, the actors have all been chosen because they look young. But even a show like Sex Education is working with actors who are maybe 22, 23, 24. And these are all, actors in their early 30s playing 16. So it's, quite intriguing. I wonder if it has something to do with the nature of the comedy. They need someone who has more experience in maybe improv or something to, pull off the level of comedic. Anyway, I know we're going off topic here. But I mean, I didn't realize that Yvonne Craig was already in her 30s by the time she was playing this character, because she plays a lot younger, it seems to me.
But at the risk of going farther down the rabbit hole, it was totally believable that she was, in her early to mid 20s.
I think so too.
Out of college, but
yeah,
we happen to really enjoy Superman and Lois, and Alexander Garfin and Jordan Elsass have never looked 14. I mean, I'm sure they did when they actually were 14. But on the show, there is no way we believe they are 14. So we just decided we're just going to go with it. We don't really believe it, but if the show wants to insist on it, okay. Because we thought they did a really good job with their roles. It's just that they didn't look 14.
Right. I always wonder if there's a desire, on the part of the producers to make certain that, if we're imagining that they have sexual contact, that if the actors are not in their minority any longer, that it's more acceptable somehow to think of them, even if they're playing 14, if the actors are in their 20s or maybe even their 30s, that it's more acceptable to the audience in some way to imagine that could be happening.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay, well, we've still got Glacia Glaze to talk about in Ice Spy, the Duo Defy.
There's something about the title Ice Spy that I absolutely love. It's, it's as dumb as they come, but it still just cracks me up every time.
Well, wasn't the Bill Cosby, Robert Culp
Spy
running at the same time that this was, or about the same time as
this? Yeah, definitely. I've taught a few episodes of that show in my TV history class, and it's kind of incredible. It's kind of an incredible show. And Robert Culp was apparently quite progressive, and wrote some episodes in which Bill Cosby had to work with, they're dealing with African nations that are, potentially, on the cusp of moving over to communism and falling, under the spell of the Reds. And Bill Cosby's got to go in there and handle that in some way that doesn't seem either condescending or just plain old racist. And it's really quite sensitively done. It's kind of a remarkable show to go back to. I never would have thought of going back to it if I hadn't been looking for shows, that I could teach that were actually pushing racial boundaries in the 60s and 70s. But it's definitely worth a look back at.
So Glacia Glaze, it's clearly hinted that she's romantically involved with Freeze, because she keeps calling him darling, and not in the way that Marcia Queen of Diamonds or Black Widow would say darling to any random person. And she says at one point that she's willing to give up her ice skating career for him. And then there's this weird scene in part 2.
Well, there's hot, and then there's Eli Wallach hot. Just remember that.
Right. And he's also cold, though. So Professor Isaacson...
That's half the joke.
Professor Isaacson admits that he made the formula and he never figured out how to use it. And Glacia comes in and she thinks Freeze is going too hard on Isaacson. And then Freeze impresses on her that they can all be rich if they figure out how to use the formula. And then she starts kissing the professor. And Freeze says, "Go, Glacia, go." And like, what? Is she supposed to seduce Isaacson for some reason? And then the next thing we know, the new freeze ray is up and running. And I mean, Freeze never said anything about seducing Isaacson, or that like kissing him is supposed to help him think more clearly and figure out how to use the formula. I mean, being kissed by Leslie Parrish certainly wouldn't help me think any more clearly.
I just reminded of the song about the rooster that came into the yard and suddenly the hens are laying eggnog in wax containers. Just like she makes out with Elisha Cook Jr. and all of a sudden he's got this idea.
So yeah, I don't know if there's something that they're trying to hint at here that's not that's kind of off limits for the kiddies, or what exactly is supposed to be going on there.
Just the logistics of a real relationship between any normal warm-blooded human and Mr. Freeze is kind of mind-boggling just in the practical aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it kind of takes Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex to a whole other level.
I love the way you think, Nancy. This is awesome.
And honestly, there again, change of actors. I really preferred Otto Preminger as Mr. Freeze to Eli Wallach. He seemed to fit the role better. And Eli Wallach, of course, is one of the best actors we've ever produced. But
yes,
I think I was used to Otto Preminger. And so I expected to see him. And I think that works against whoever follows him.
Probably, yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, it's true. I really like George Sanders as an actor. I think he's terrific.
Was it George Sanders? Am I confused?
No, George Sanders was the first Mr. Freeze at the beginning of season 1. And then Otto Preminger played him in season 2 at the beginning of season 2, right? And then Eli Wallach shows up at the end of season 2 playing the same character.
Yeah, there are three Freeze appearances, and each one it's a different actor.
I'd forgotten about George Sanders.
Yeah, George Sanders is kind of great. He's the one who says zoom zoom.
Do you make the plane go zoom zoom zoom?
Yeah. It's like he's 4 apparently and playing with Hot Wheels when he's talking to his lackeys. But I agree with you. When I think of Mr. Freeze, I almost always think of Otto Preminger almost immediately. But I don't know what to make of this business with Elisha Cook. It's hard for me to look at Elisha Cook and not think Maltese Falcon as well. So I've got wait, because he plays the Elmer, the kind of Gunsel, as he's called in that film, who is working for Casper Gutman. He has the greatest name of any supervillain in movie history because he's like enormously fat, right? A name like Gutman is so perfect. He's sort of like the Kingpin before the Kingpin. But I don't really understand what we're supposed to take away from that, except that apparently, sexual attraction makes men incredibly creative or something. It almost seems like there's a kind of worry, long traditional worry that goes back to the beginnings of the history of art, in which men are anxious about the fact that they can't give birth, and so they try to create stuff. As a way of compensating for the fact that they can't produce children out of their bodies. They have to make stuff and produce these amazing skyscrapers and technologies and all of that. Anyway, so yeah, it feels like if I were a child watching that show, and I don't ever remember seeing this arc as a kid. Interestingly,
I'm sure we saw it, but yeah, I don't have.
It never made an impression on me. But see,
as
an adult, I wonder what the hell would I have thought of this as a child. That she makes out with Elijah Cook, and then suddenly it's time for him to come up with this amazing freeze ray.
Well, of course, he comes up with a gun, so you could take whatever you want to from that. But
point taken. I
don't remember watching it either. I felt like I was watching it for the first time, and I watched the show pretty faithfully. So I'm thinking if I had paid attention to this show as a kid, I would have been more interested in the seal than in anything else.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Good point. It's like Homer Simpson saying, look, a monkey. Finally, he sees something he cares about.
Well, yeah, any commentary on Isolde as a character? That's another woman in season 2 here.
Well, she has a great deal of agency. She plays a couple of important roles. And it's technically a speaking part, so I hope she got paid at equity levels for a speaking role.
Yeah, was she in the guild?
Well, I don't know.
I sure hope so. I hope she got a lot of fish for this.
One would hope.
But, she doesn't need a Tristan either, which I think is great because there's, no imagining Isolde without Tristan, at least in Wagner's imagination. And here she gets to play it solo.
This is totally off topic. But when you look at the Arthurian legends, I have never understood where Tristan and Isolde fit in to the Arthurian story. And I know we don't want to go down that rabbit hole tonight, but since it came up, just putting that out there.
It's a really good question. I think it was also Hitchcock and eventually produced Vertigo and, use a version of Wagner's Liebestod theme to kind of serenade his lovers. Yeah, I think that's the only reason for it. That's just me speaking as a Hitchcock fan and also as a slightly crazy Batman fan.
So this batch of episodes, did anything stand out as being different from what we've seen before? I mean, we've seen plenty of poor deluded girls and women who don't have agency. We did find a few who did have agency in this batch.
Well, Harriet and Alfred got more screen time than they generally do.
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Harriet and Bruce go backstage at the ice skating show. Aunt Harriet is at the Egyptian ball. In the episode, there's the whole lamentable going mod sequence for Aunt Harriet. At the end of the Joker episode, the last Joker episode that we were talking about.
Pop goes the Joker.
And flop goes the Joker, yeah.
And Alfred's running him up and down the bat poles.
Mm-hmm.
So it did
a comic highlight of the whole series.
Now, that was something I really remembered from when I was a kid because I loved that.
Sorry, Nancy, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say it just seemed to me that those two characters got more screen time than they did in the earlier batches of episodes that we've watched, and it was not just "Hi, Aunt Harriet, sir, it's the bat phone, gotta go by," and then that was the end of it. There seemed to be a little bit more in there with both of them.
That's true. Yeah, Alfred is even at the art show at the beginning of Pop Goes the Joker, and then finds out, sees the Joker show up, and then runs off and uses the telephone to, weirdly enough, tell Aunt Harriet to tell Bruce and Dick that there's a painting there called The Laughing Man, and apparently this is like a predetermined code that the Joker is in town and at an art gallery and shooting ketchup and mustard at various paintings. So yeah, you're right. He does. Alfred certainly has more of a kind of pivotal role to play there. Well, here's a question. I have often wondered what became of the poor deluded girl motif of the initial season. And, I wondered why it doesn't carry through, at least in a really direct way, in the second and third seasons. The third season, I think of the third season as a wash because there were so many characters on the screen at all times. There was no time to really pick up any motifs from earlier seasons. They just had to make sure everybody got their dialogue out as quickly as possible. But I wondered, if we as a group have any sense of why that trope might have worn itself out, or whether we are seeing it continued in a different way in season 2, where the poor deluded girl being the Moll who feels regret at the end of her time with the supervillain, and then has Batman basically nearly shedding a tear and trying to reform her. That motif seems to be kind of, by the wayside by the time we get to season 2.
I think it's feasible that they just wore it out because they did so much of it in season 1. And if you watch a bunch of the episodes together, like we do for these discussions, you're really kind of getting smacked in the face with it, one after another after another. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I do think that there's a good chance they just wore it out.
Yeah. Also, I think there were some different writers in season 2 who did little or nothing in season 1. So the difference in writers might have been part of that also. But yeah, I mean, I think, as the show went on, there was a reason to kind of change things up. And, I think that's what gives you more Alfred and Aunt Harriet than we had at the beginning. Because, those two are getting tired of being relegated to the opening, the cold open, and then you never see them again. So they're giving those actors more to do. And yeah, I think the writers are seeing, we need to have different formulas for how the episodes go, rather than always a poor deluded girl getting dragged along by the villain.
Well, and I think also, I just was looking up via that famous assistant in answering questions, Google, when the Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced. And that's 1972.
Okay.
And that was a response to societal pressure and developments. It didn't just spring full blown from the head of some congressman like Athena from the head of Jove. It was, and so I'm just sort of wondering, because I don't remember if there were societal changes at the time that could have made them feel that the poor deluded girl thing was really not current, that it was not in keeping with the tenor of the times. I don't know. That's purely a guess, because I didn't remember this stuff. I was busy being a kid, but it occurs to me that might have been one of the reasons behind that.
Yeah, I wondered about that too, if it was women's lib coming in bit by bit. I mean, I don't know, but the men writing the show, I don't know how much what they really felt about that. But yeah, there might have been some idea of incorporating that in. Although, of course, again, season 3, we have the Nora Clavicle story, but yeah, we'll get to that later.
Well, and we have Batgirl is not allowed to hit anybody. It's like, really?
Right. Yeah. She's not allowed to do like kung fu. She has to do cute little ballet kicks, which I know drove Yvonne herself pretty crazy.
Well, and here's Bruce Lee smashing furniture.
Yeah, exactly. My impression has been that either the trope just wore itself out because it happened so frequently in the first season, or whether consciously or unconsciously, it just seemed like it no longer fit somehow, that it was, infantilizing the women who were clearly grown up. They weren't just, children who had erred. And in the first season, often the women were explicitly presented as childlike. One was even basically a high school dropout in the high school episodes with the Joker early in season 1.
And what's interesting is you get into season 3 and you have a lot more female villains.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that was just because that was who was in Dozier's Rolodex, or if there was some effort to have more female lead villains, or if it just kind of happened.
Well, attract everyone and offend no one. I think it was important to them to try to gain an audience of women as well. And whether they understood how to do that or not is a different question altogether. But we might see the appearance of, female villains and of Batgirl herself, obviously, as attempts to attract a wider audience when their audience seemed to be disappearing.
Yeah, but it's like with everything else, it's not an even progression. It's a forward and back, side to side thing.
For sure.
There was an issue of the Justice League. I think I was in high school at the time. I don't really remember for sure. There's a big battle. The Justice League's fighting some big gang of goons. And Flash says to Wonder Woman and Black Canary, well, you stay here and tend to the wounded, and we'll take care of this. And it's like, really, really. And so I think it's harder to go back and trace an even arc of change, because
Sure.
as you say, it depends a lot on who's writing it.
Absolutely, yeah.
It depends a lot on who's in editorial at the top and what kind of image they want to present.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're right. It doesn't, history never moves in a straight line, and particularly when it comes to, progressing past stereotypes and, conventional roles.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and I haven't seen a lot of movies.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm here to help with that.
And we are SP Film Viewers.
Each week, we take a deep dive into films that Sophie is seeing for the first time. Some of which are deemed classics, some of which are my favourites, and some are just to try and get a reaction from her.
We don't take ourselves too seriously, but we have a lot of fun talking about what we've watched.
And we hope you have fun listening to our light-hearted thoughts and ramblings on this cinematic journey.
So tune in every Thursday on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts from.
Coming up, Adam West and William Dozier interviewed by Gene Boone in Austin, Texas, before the premiere of the Batman movie on July 30th, 1966. And we read your mail in the Bat Inbox. This show is listener-supported through Patreon. Join us for $2 a month and get access to outtakes from every To the Bat-Polls episode, trivia quiz videos on 20th century entertainment, and the right to vote on future Bat-Polls topics. For a $4 monthly donation, you also get the right to have an ad for your own project on the show once a month, and hours of exclusive podcasts, including our monthly issue-by-issue walk through the early years of The Amazing Spider-Man. And we've now finished the Ditko years and reached the debut of John Romita Sr. So go to patreon.com/deconcomics and select the level of your monthly donation. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support.
You should. You got to show you. Well, you've got to be free to move. Do you know that your bat?
Do you know
that your bat boat was built here in Austin?
Yes, Mr. Dozier told me that.
Surely, yes.
Lastron.
Right, Lastron did it. I've been watching. Some friends of mine helped do the design, so I've been sneaking looks in the garage all along. How does it go? How does it work?
Very exciting on the screen.
I think it does too.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It's incredible. It enables us to really at tremendously high speeds on sea to chase whomever we wish.
At any moment, at any given moment, the drop of a hat. Tell me, is Batman, of course, is premiering here,
Yes.
Mr. Dozier?
Yes.
Yes, right.
Since you called me.
First public showing will be this afternoon.
Yes, right. And then does it open simultaneously all over the country, or how does it
No,
plan?
it opens this month, or August, all over the country. In New York, the 24th, in Chicago, the 26th, in Los Angeles, the 31st, but it opens what they call multiple situations every place.
Well, now, is Batman your only involvement at the moment?
No.
I didn't think so.
I have 2 other series going on the air in September, and a couple, 3 or 4 others on the drawing boards, as we say.
Or do you want to say the names of them?
Well, I will, yes. Green Hornet is going on.
That's what I knew.
And the Tammy Grimes show, a half-hour
I love
comedy with Tammy Grimes.
Well, I love
Those are both
Well,
going
we'll
on
look
in
forward
September.
to them. They're telling me we have no more time.
Is that Tammy Hornet and Green?
And Green Grimes, so that's awful. Adam West and William Dozier
Thank you very
here in
much.
connection with the Batman premiere. Thank you.
Peace.
That's Tonto. Yeah. Thank you both very much.
Yes, it was very
Do they
pleasant.
stay here for someone?
I'd like to get some sort of...
Surely. Without me.
Bat Inbox on our discussion of the script for A Piece of the Action, coming from various sources. First of all, from the all-seeing, all-knowing 66 Batman message board. And there's only one message there, but Paul, please... Okay, I split this up, so I'll have you read the first half of it, and I'll read the second half.
Okay, it's from Batwinged Hornet. Nice follow-up, guys. Tim, I believe O'Hara's overrated line meant the Green Hornet had a big/notorious reputation known far and wide. Recall Commissioner Gordon's shocked reaction to Pinky's first call about the Green Hornet. But said reputation would be cut down if Green Hornet and Kato faced off against the dynamic duo. In other words, the Green Hornet, as opposed to Batman, was overrated or would be soon enough. I suppose I read something magazine piece that there's so much information getting thrown at us by various web feeds, but nevertheless it was about the word overrated. Just that it doesn't actually mean. People use it to mean that it's that they don't like it, pretty much. But that's in the age of media, of massive media swirls, not the age of Commissioner Gordon.
So the conclusion was that the word overrated is in fact overrated.
Yes, yeah, it had something to do with it being assumed that. It doesn't matter. All of this should probably just go right in the cutting room floor. Let's see. I had to read this line of dialogue again, page 72. Hornet, no use in interrupting another bat climb. And Batwinged Hornet says, another bat climb? The Green Hornet had to be referring to the only time they interrupted the duo, which was seen in The Spell of Tut. If that was Hoffman being continuity-minded, then he earned a credit for being so aware of the series to the degree that he did not see all episodes as unrelated one-offs, but a continuing story for the characters. I must assume someone probably reminded him that in the Tut arc, Batman and Robin recognized the Green Hornet and Kato as fellow crime fighters instead of criminals, so GH's another line had to be dropped.
Yeah, that was a really good catch. That didn't dawn on me.
Yeah, I think because I often read, especially the first time through, I read the script spottily, like, 10 pages here, 20 pages there, 5 pages there. I thought perhaps I had just forgotten that there was a bat climb earlier in the script, rather than this being a reference to the bat climb in which the two of them interrupted him from the King Tut arc.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, so that was a place where the conversation that was in the script was completely dumped and completely rewritten as broadcast. And I think when that happens, I sometimes tend to just not read the conversation that wasn't used.
No, I think those are often interesting, if for no other reason than that those kinds of conversations might clarify something that goes by too fast in the script as written, but wouldn't have gone by too fast had there been an earlier, mention of whatever dynamic is being described in the discussion.
So Batwing Hornet goes on with a question that you have already answered earlier in this episode with Nancy. Paul, I'm not sure I've heard you mention Roger C. Carmel not being your cup of tea. Reasons? So,
yeah. I just find him really unbelievable as Harry Mudd, because it strikes me that the fact that he's somehow able to finagle himself all of these resources and people who will pay attention to him and give him what he wants seems so unlikely, because he's just irritating. He just seems not ingratiating to me, but just like. He's kind of like the salesman from Arthur Miller. He might be liked, but not well liked, because he tries too hard. But as I said when we were talking with Nancy, Carmel I think does a more serviceable job as Colonel Gum, if for no other reason than that he doesn't have to be liked. He's a master criminal, or at least thinks that he is, and so his affect, his normal. Actorly persona fits much better with the character of kind of master crook.
Okay. And Hornet goes on, Paul, you expressed the wish that Batman and Green Hornet revealed their true identities to each other in order to work together. I think I might have said that also, or at least I've been thinking it ever since I was 9 years old.
Well, it doesn't really. Maybe I expressed it as a wish, Green Hornet, but I'm not feeling it anymore. I don't know, why, but I was a little surprised that I had said that, but I totally believe that I did.
But he goes on, that would run counter to the very idea of the contrasting methods and personalities which fuel conflict. Batman and the Green Hornet may be fighting a mutual enemy, but that does not sweep aside the fact that Batman and Robin see the Green Hornet and Kato, knowing their history, as the ideological and moral opposites of themselves. Thus, they are a threat needing to be arrested. I don't know, I think my feeling about it is just, it's the kid in me. I want to see the heroes work together. And I understand all the reasons why that maybe doesn't work in this context, but on a certain level, it's just unsatisfying.
Well, I think for me too, maybe this is what I was expressing, but it just seems that there's no concrete reason that's presented to us why they're, on the wrong side of the law. There's no heist brought up. There's no, specific historical moment in which the Green Hornet and Kato, killed people or something like that. And of course there wouldn't be, because they're actually, heroes. But it feels very abstract to me that they just seem to be, as you say, Batwing Hornet, the ideological and moral opposites of Batman and Robin. But it feels like yin and yang. There's just this abstract sense, you bad guys, we good guys, at least as Batman and Robin see themselves, and the kind of players on the other side. And Green Hornet and Kato are, of course, influenced to behave the way they behave because they want to keep up their personae as members of the underworld.
Right. They want to appear to be bad guys so that bad guys can be tricked into working with them and then caught. Which seems to be like a strategy that would work for about 10 minutes. Right,
until
yeah.
everyone in the underworld actually knew who you really were, which side you were really fighting on.
Yeah, it's like the underworld people never talk to each other and say, actually the Green Hornet tricked us and turned us into the police. So,
yeah, at the very least, jailhouse and prison conversations would probably have gotten that information out. Nevertheless, it is fantasy television, and if in fact, Green Hornet and Kato are sort of locked into the same position as Batman and Robin of having a bunch of independent episodes that are not really in continuity, as BH was talking about. Then they're sort of in a perpetual present where the news never gets out.
Next paragraph, final paragraph of Batwing Hornet's message, about the treatment of Agnes Moorehead and Marion Lorne on the Bewitched set. My recollection comes from interviews with Elizabeth Montgomery, where she claimed the ladies were treated well, with Moorehead having the kind of personality which would imply she would not tolerate disrespect. Sounds just like Endora. While Lorne was seen as sweet. That and Montgomery had talked about how much she loved Lorne, being broken up at the 1968 Emmy Awards, where she accepted a posthumous Best Supporting Actress Emmy for Lorne. But she did butt heads with Moorehead from time to time, even getting into heated arguments. Yet Montgomery did not harbor any sort of hatred for her senior performer.
I think my question was, maybe I'm wrong about this because my memory is terrible, as you know, but
Who
maybe...
are you again?
What? What am I doing here? Why am I looking at this flat image of something, people, maybe even someone I know, perhaps my brother? Anyway. I thought that my question was about whether, women on the Bewitched set were treated, fairly or, treated well, and not kind of, structurally pushed out of decisions about performance and such by men, not by each other.
Forced to do ballet kicks rather than kung fu or judo. Well, I guess there wasn't much judo or many fights on Bewitched anyway, but...
No. Usually it was just, nose twitching and people disappearing. Email from Chris Kavanaugh. Greetings, Bat Buddies, and greetings to you, Chris. You can include me as an avid Green Hornet fan. While the show has shortcomings, the episodes are compact and generally tell a solid tale in 25 minutes, until jumping the shark at the end with its alien invasion two-parter. Yes, that's a very sad way for the series to end. The show is perfectly cast. The actors' portrayals are spot on, especially Van Williams as the Hornet. Even Bill Dozier's narration has a heightened sense of urgency. I love the attached audio clip.
Be back with us next week for the concluding episode of Corpse of the Year, when Britt Reed is attacked by a deadly pretender.
Garth? Garth?
And pays an accusing call on Sabrina Bradley, barely escaping a noose of entrapment.
You and your partner better stop playing games. Put your hands up. Keep them up and don't try any tricks.
Then faces a showdown in a duel to the death. Juggernaut against Juggernaut. Next week, same time, same channel.
The day-to-night effect never bothered me, or day-for-night, really. It emphasizes the Hornet's nocturnal activities within the show's budget constraints in a way Batman never accomplished. Yes, that's true. Day for night was not something that they ever did on Batman that I can recall. Well, maybe a couple. Yeah,
occasionally, I think Bookworm
in the pilot. Mm-hmm.
Bookworm with the tower, bell tower. I think that scene with Batman and Chief O'Hara was day for night.
Right, and in the pilot, when the Batmobile is parked outside the nightclub, it's day for night in the parking lot as the Batmobile sets off its own burglar alarm.
Oh, really? I always took that scene to be night for night, but
well, it could be, but I got the impression that it was filmed on a set, so it wouldn't matter whether it was daytime outside or not. But we could go back and check. Jim Beard wrote his recent Moonstone Books novella from the perspective of the protagonist. This is back to Chris, a military veteran rather than the Hornet himself. It explores the general public's perception of the Hornet's activities and his unnamed aide. It provides a sense of how Cato's secret identity would work in the real world. Then he included a link for the Green Hornet How Sweet the Sting novella by Jim Beard. Also, yes, last thing Chris has to say in this message is, I'd love to hear you cover the Batman 66 Green Hornet crossover comic sometime. I'd completely forgotten that existed, Tim.
Yeah, there have been a number of those kind of one-offs, or maybe, I don't know if they were miniseries or single issues, but there was another one that was Batman 66 and Wonder Woman 76 or 7, whatever year that was, that the Linda Carter show premiered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, from our own blog, I was shocked. There were messages from three or four different people there. Like, what? People commenting on our blog at tothebatpoles.libsyn.com. David Campbell, I think he's referring to Greek drama here because we talked about it a bit in the episode.
Oh, not Greek drama, but rather Homeric long narrative poems.
Okay. But he says, the rosy fingertips of dawn was one of the phrases used to fill space. It allowed an orator to keep talking while they thought of the next line in a story. They would have phrases that they knew so well that they could recite without thinking.
Right. And the audiences were also used to that as a convention of like saying once upon a time at the beginning of every fairy tale.
Mm-hmm.
It was, considered, I think, both comforting and just, part of the necessary machinery of a long narrative poem being spoken by the same person for hours at a time.
Steve Small writes, all listeners of To the Bat-Poles are fans of Batman 66. Well, that stands to reason.
Yay.
I am also a fan and listener to the Green Hornet old-time radio show. With the sound effects and music, it is an all-encompassing listening experience. Since I listen to the radio show, I appreciate the Green Hornet TV show, but not really a fan. About this Batman arc, poor execution from a bad idea. They should have scrapped this plot and come up with a different storyline. For this arc to happen, they had to be in the same universe, but they shouldn't have met. I don't know what would have been a serviceable plot. Okay, different take.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, Steve. Actually, it does seem like a strange fit. Although at the same time, there are tons of people who consider this their favorite arc of the entire series. So, but yeah, I do feel the same way that the universes don't quite touch.
Yeah, I mean the moods of the shows are so different. That it was kind of difficult to fit them together.
Yeah, and Chris's remark about Van Williams reminds me just of how uncampy Williams's performance is, and how much more kind of seriously he seemed to be taking the character. There was a different direction, not the camp direction at all that Batman took. Okay, now we're not quite down to the bottom here. Jerry Dooley says, something that has always bothered me about this script is the scene where Kato and Britt are in the hotel room alone, and Kato refers to Britt as Mr. Reed. It bugged me a little, too. Yeah. Really? This makes no sense, and I'm surprised that Bruce Lee agreed to say it, as he didn't want to be seen as a lowly manservant. In the GH series, Kato never refers to Britt by name when they're speaking to one another. Kato's also seen brushing Britt's jacket. To me, this just makes no sense. Two guys who risk their lives together, and yet Kato is still just a houseboy. Even in 1966, this is just pathetic, I agree. The whole manservant thing should have been used as just a ruse for the purpose of outsiders. I know Kato does serve coffee when Scanlon shows up, but still, Mr. Reed? Also,
yeah,
guys...
Every time I heard that or read it as we were preparing for that script episode, I would kind of wince at it every time. It just was such a wrong note.
Yeah, and brushing off the jacket, even when there's nobody around, suggests that that's all he is to Reed, at least in that persona when they're not. Anyway.
And in that scene, I thought it would have been better for him to address him as Hornet. Because I think he doesn't have the mask on, but he has the rest of the Green Hornet costume. If that's what it is, costume, uniform, duds, right. Whatever.
Threads. Maybe you should have called him Mr. Hornet. That would have been in keeping with the strangeness that's kind of sprinkled over their relationship. Also, guys, where is the infamous scene where Robin defeats Kato in the final fight? Supposedly it led to Bruce Lee storming off the set. It's legendary in the world of us Green Hornet fans. Was this not in the script you saw?
So I went back and looked at it, and it says Kato makes some tricky gung-fu, should be gong-fu, maneuvers, but Boy Wonder outmaneuvers the wily Oriental Wince with some good old-fashioned bat punches. So the stage direction there does have Robin winning, but of course what we get on the screen is, it just ends in what Dozier calls a Mexican standoff. And, they both seem to give as good as they get in that fight. It's really even.
Right.
So I'm wondering what the source is of the story that Burt won and Bruce was upset, because I feel like I've heard it before somewhere. I skimmed Boy Wonder, Burt's book, and after I got past the bulk of the book, which is an X-rated movie pitch, really is. But on page 157, Burt claims that the Robin Kato fight was Bruce Lee's first filmed fight, which seems kind of odd to me since most of the Green Hornet episodes had already been filmed and broadcast by that point.
That's weird.
And he mentions how they lived, so he and Bruce Lee lived in the same building and they had sparred and socialized. Says nothing about winning the fight or Bruce getting upset. So, Jerry, fill us in. What's the source of that story?
Yes. I don't have my copy of Eisner in front of me right at the moment. I don't think it shows up in there. Anyway.
Okay. But, Jerry or anyone else, you can write to us at batpulls@deconstructingcomics.com or on our blog or through the all-seeing, all-knowing message board, 66batman.com. So when we do script episodes, we give our patrons a choice of 3 or 4 scripts to choose from, and then whatever gets the most votes is what we do a script episode about. You know, usually I'll pick the choices. What are the scripts I'm going to offer? And the last 4 times that we've polled our patrons about scripts, the same script has come in second every time, and that's none other than Nora Clavicle and the Ladies' Crime Club.
Oh, I feel an ache in my own clavicle every time I hear that title.
We're interested in seeing if the first draft is any less of a car crash than what was broadcast, or could it somehow be worse than what we got? So we'll find out next time. Or actually, I'll be linking to the script in the show notes for this episode, or there are actually several, like 3 different versions of the script, plus a separate file that's a script of the tag scene introducing the Penguin episode that came next, the teaser. So those are all linked in the show notes, so you can go ahead and take a look for yourself and comment on them within the next week or 2, and we might quote you in our episode on the Nora scripts.
Yes, and please do weigh in. I'd be fascinated to hear whether the script is more cringe-inducing than the actual arc for, those of you who are also going to read it. Or less cringe-inducing.
Okay, well, so enjoy reading the Nora script, and we'll see you in 2 weeks at the same Bat RSS feed. Thanks to Nancy Northcott for joining us again this episode. For more on her, check out the link in the show notes. You'll also find links to the theme version by Colie Brice, Chris Kavanaugh's link to more info on Jim Beard and Joel Naprstek's book, The Green Hornet, How Sweet the Sting, and the Nora Clavicle scripts. If you have any interesting Bat audio to pass on, and I very much need your ideas, or you'd like to make a donation to the show through PayPal, or you just want to drop us a line, the address is batpolls@deconstructingcomics.com. You can also comment on the thread for each episode and each script at 66batman.com/forums, or on our blog at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. We're on Twitter at DeconComics, and on the Deconstructing Comics channel on YouTube. You can hear outtakes from this and every episode of To the Bat-Polls and vote for topics for future episodes by supporting us at patreon.com/deconcomics. You can also help us out by shopping via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, by sharing our episodes on your social media, and by subscribing to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And spread the word. Let all your friends who are Batman 66 fans know about the show. Don't forget the links to 3 versions of the Nora Clavicle script are in the show notes. We await your comments, and we'll discuss the scripts next time. See you then. To the Bat-Polls is a production of deconstructingcomics.com.